everybody, I'm back with the final wrap up of Mother's Day month with Guardians of the Galaxy. And it's going to be like a back to back because next week we're going to start Father's Day movie review month with Guardians of the Galaxy Part 2. And since the second one is very geared towards Peter Quill's father, I figured the first one might as well cover here for Mother's Day because it's more so geared towards how he feels about his mom. So before we continue, please like and subscribe. Smash that like button. Hit the notification bell if you want more content like this. Follow me in the links in the description below. My TikTok that I just started up, my Patreon, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and my YouTube channel. So anyway, yeah, this movie obviously directed by James Gunn, and I want to be real with you guys because I know the Guardians films have been reviewed by many fans in terms of their favorite top, and a lot of people put the Guardians, at least the first two Guardians films, if not the first one, in their top 5 favorite MCU films. Now, if you can go on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/talkativecarl, I did like a YouTube tier list of all like MCU films and TV shows that I've seen and how I rank them, which is very extensive here. And after every phase, I'm going to go back to it to add a little bit more of what I saw from the new phase and see how I feel about that or how I rank them. Guardians is on my A list in terms of ranking because, I think I like Guardians 2 a little bit better than Guardians 1, but I wouldn't put the Guardians films in my top 5. Hell, I don't even know if I even put them in my top 10. I like them, but it's just like, I don't know. Maybe just, don't get the same air of feeling that other fans enjoyed from the movie. Like I said, I like it. I can see why people like it, but it's just like I would never put it in my top 5. Maybe I can put it in my top 10, but it's just. But anyway, and this is before the whole scandal with James Gunn, which obviously was frivolous, but also pushed him into being the head runner of DC movies right now. So you shot yourself in the foot, Disney. Now you got like a legit competitor that knows your blueprint and now is going to mimic it to make DC probably very profitable now. Even though it was like a long time coming, but better late than never. So this movie had like a budget of $232.3 million gross worth, and it raked in the box office of $773.3 million. So it obviously did very well. And I gotta point out, and this is just me, I personally think people love this movie because of the soundtrack. The soundtrack really set the tone for this film, and I think people glommed onto it because it's like heavy 80s rock ballad type of stuff, which is cool. I love the music, but I think not to say the story wasn't good as well, but I think it's like a walking music video in a way, or just a walking soundtrack. But it's also at its detriment, at least into the wider array of films moving forward after the Guardians. If you remember because I did like a recap of all the MCU movie trailers, which is also on my YouTube channel, so you can check that out. But the way the trailer was edited for the Guardians films, I'm pretty sure the same editor is working for many studio companies. So many films have been aping off the whole Guardians of the Galaxy aesthetic, which is kind of like ad nauseum at this point. I mean, just recently, like, or even like in certain video games, State of Play just happened today, and one of the games that was being displayed, Concord or something like that, very Guardians of the Galaxy heavy with the characters. One of them being very obviously the Drax type, and then uh, you got things like the Borderlands movie. You cannot tell me the way that trailer was edited is very Guardians heavy type of feel to it, and it's like I'm pretty sure other people have many other examples too, and it's gotten kind of old at this point. It's been done to death, and it's like once something is Hollywood's funny like that. Once something gets popping, the copying happens. It's like I want our movie to look like John Wick. I want our movie, you get like movies like Salt or whatever or Ultraviolet or something like that because they want to have their own John Wick. Once something gets popping, we gotta have something like that. Oh, like I want our Borderlands trailer to get like people like it's fun. So make it fun. Like do the Guardians thing to it. And it's like the lack of creativity is astounding in Hollywood. And going from video games and movies and TV shows, it's like every so often you get some rare creative original thought. But once that happens and it gets popular, so many other studios for a good few years will try to mimic a trailer or characters from that particular thing that people glommed onto. I get it, but at the same time, you don't want to overdo it, and that's the major drawback with Guardians, where it's like what makes y'all successful is also what makes other people cringe. Whereas like you can't keep doing the exact same thing. In the same way, it's like because the Nolan made the Dark Knight trilogy so popular. Because of that, the DC films, a lot of them up until a certain point, was trying to, apply what made Dark Knight work and trying to apply it to every other hero. Of I'll be a few exceptions, like I don't count like the Wonder Woman films, but like Man of Steel, BVS. You cannot tell me they try to apply the whole Nolan thing to it, and it's just like that's not Superman. You cannot make that Superman. That's what I'm saying. Like they, Hollywood tends to learn the wrong lessons. I just thought I'd add that in here because, I wanted to make a point about that in my feelings towards Guardians of the Galaxy. Although good, Hollywood learned the wrong lessons from its trailer and the movie itself. But anyway, the movie stars Chris Pratt as Peter Quill, Star-Lord. And once again, thanks to this movie and thanks to James Gunn partially as well, Chris Pratt is almost in every freaking thing. And it's not just him. It's just like Pedro Pascal is in that camp now where it's like he's being thrown at almost everything and he doesn't need to be in everything. Did we really need Chris Pratt as Mario or as Garfield? It's like, honestly, he's an A-list star right now. So it's like, something like Super Mario and Garfield don't need A-list stars. You can, the IP alone will bring people in. You can get like lesser known actors to fill those roles. I'm just saying. You got Zoe Saldana as Gamora, because Zoe Saldana is always in a movie where she's in makeup and aesthetics. Dave Bautista as Drax the Destroyer. Vin Diesel as Groot. Bradley Cooper as Rocket Raccoon. Lee Pace as Ronan the Accuser, Michael Rooker as Yondu, Karen Gillan as Nebula, uh, Jaman Hansu as Korath, John C. Riley as Romain Day, Corpsman of the Nova Corps, which is kind of like Space Cops. And we got Glenn Close as Irani Rail, the leader of the Nova Corps, also known as Nova Prime. And we got Benicio del Toro as the Collector. Oh, and we got we got Sean Gunn as the right hand of Yondu. And Josh Brolin appears as Thanos for a little bit. So, pretty cool stars, all in all. In terms of my favorite characters here, Rocket and Star-Lord and Gamora is probably like my favorites in the Guardians films, especially Rocket. But honestly, the Collector, in case you don't know, in the Marvel comics, the Collector and the Grandmaster, who you saw in Thor Ragnarok, in the comics, they're brothers. But one likes playing games all too much, to like almost to like a very deadly level, while the other brother is obsessed with collecting things to an obsessive level. And it just, because the Grandmaster in the MCU is played by crap from Jurassic Park. Crap, I'm blanking on him right now. Dang it. Jeff Goldblum. Jesus. In the MCU, I'm not sure why at some point they didn't think of this, especially with Kevin Feige. He's supposed to be like very deep into his Marvel stuff, Marvel comics. Should know that, especially after they introduced Grandmaster in the third Thor film, you think you'd be eager at some point to get Benicio del Toro and the Grandmaster in the same film together, because those two actors could just easily, chew up the screen in a perfect way, and it's like it's right for that. I mean, it's so good. It's like these two are so good of an actors. I'd want them to in like the same scene together as Grandmaster and the Collector, brothers, and them, because they have like in the comics they have like a bit of a rivalry kind of going on, or animosity towards each other, because they're different ways of how they move in the world or the universe. Anyway, so the movie begins in 1988, where a young Peter Quill is in the hospital as his mom is dying of cancer, and on her last moments, she gives Peter this little gift that he refuses to open all throughout the film. And of course, he ends up running away because he just could not handle the idea of his mom dying and everything like that. And he's surrounded by, family, but he runs away. He ends up in like a field where he gets picked up by Yondu's crew, the Ravagers. So for the next 29 years, he's been traveling in space, pretty much being like the whole the Han Solo type, with banging hot alien chicks. I'm surprised he didn't. He should have gotten like some space herpes or something like that. The way he just nailing broads left and right. Uh, so he was hired to go fetch this orb in this desolate planet. So that's where you get the one of the most awesome openings to a film, where he's singing "Come and Get Your Love," uh, and of course I can't help but think about Avengers Endgame, where future Gamora and future War Machine goes after him as they spying on him in the background as because we're with Peter Quill listening to the music and just giving the vibes and just like uh enjoying himself because he's just by himself. So we all probably be in that same position. But on the outside looking in, it's like he's badly singing, and it's like kind of taking the piss out of the moment of James Gunn's film a bit, whereas like, oh, this is a cool like character. He's like into 80s rock and everything like that. It's like it's so funny because I can't help but think like, man, pretty soon we'll see like those two heroes in the background ready to like ambush this dude at some point. Uh, but eventually I will cover. Like I'm trying to like go over as much ground before I start doing a review of the first Avengers film. Or at least the first two Avengers films eventually down the line, covering all the other stuff that I never got a chance to do like a review on. So eventually I'll cover like the Avengers films. Anyway, uh, uh, we not that much of a spoiler after so many years, but I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be the Power Stone. Uh, that they don't know it's an Infinity Stone yet, but it's clearly I think that they're supposed to be the Power Stone, and that's where Peter's coming to pick up this orb, and that's where he gets ambushed by Korath, who is part of Ronan the Accuser's strike force, and he makes it his escape and heads off to Xandar, the home planet of the Nova Corps. And while he's trying to pawn that off, it turns out that, the people coming after the orb turns out to be Ronan's men, and freaking out the shot worker. It's like, oh my god, Ronan the Accuser, because in the backdrop, the Kree planet as a whole made this kind of treaty with the Nova Corps to like, because the Kree, as we see from like the first Captain Marvel movie and the Marvels film, that the Kree are pretty much like kind of conquerors in a way. Uh, so we know that eventually in Infinity War, Thanos comes to Nova Prime, destroys it, takes the stone from there. Uh, so, because the Nova Corps was pretty much like a giant police force, keeping certain people like the Kree in check from going from crazy in a galaxy. But the first Captain Marvel movie is set in the 90s, so this is around that time where like laying waste to planets that is inhabited by, for example, the Skrulls. So I'm pretty sure it's around 2014 time where they finally decided to get off their bus and issue like, okay, we're issuing a treaty. Part of the treaty, you stop doing what you was doing for years, kind of thing. But they still kind of assholes. They don't want to get involved when things get eventually hectic. But anyway, we see that Thanos loaned his two assassins, his pseudo daughters, Nebula and Gamora, to Ronan in order to make sure that they get that orb and make sure everything goes smoothly. So Gamora offers to go to Xandar to retrieve the orb. the MacGuffin. There's always got to be a MacGuffin in certain places. Can't be helped sometimes. So she steals it from Peter Quill while Rocket and Groot is there collecting the bounty on Peter Quill's head because Yondu expected Peter back, and he's been like kind of dipping and dodging Yondu for a while. So Yondu put a bounty on his head just to capture Peter, so he can finally get a hold of him because he's supposed to be collecting that ore for him. So that way, because he want to, I guess, collect the money for himself, because typical Ravager thing is like the way he was taught by Yondu and his crew, you know, it's usually like it's like a piracy essentially. The spoils get spread equally among the crew, but it's always that one renegade kind of guy. But at the end of the day, you gotta look out for yourself kind of attitude, and when push comes to shove, I guess. But then, like, while Rocket and Groot and Gamora and Peter all trying to, Gamora and Peter is trying to get the orb from each other, all while Groot and Rocket is trying to capture Peter for the bounty. So it's all this big rigmarole until eventually the Nova Corps captures them, realizing they got records, so they send them off to this prison planet Klin, or Kylan, I should say, and that's where you get their little backstory, which is kind of fun in a way where, unlike in the first Suicide Squad movie, where it's kind of hacky, where he's like, "This is Katana. She got my back. She got a sword. How do you put it? Like, I will advise you not to mess with her. Her sword traps the souls of those she cuts," and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, you gave her a power set and her name, but who she is, like, as an individual level, a personal level, what's her hobbies, her dislikes, what she like to eat, what we know about. The first few minutes, we already know, a good deal about Peter Quill before you went over his little backstory as he's going through like a lineup, because he likes 80s music. He's a bit of a player and like a little bit of a showboat, a renegade kind of thing. We know all that within just like a few minutes of seeing him act it out, and just show not tell kind of situation. Same thing with like Gamora and Rocket and Groot. Before we can get like the backstory, we know a lot about these people. That's good storytelling. And at some point along the line, after Endgame, as I talked about in like a separate video a long time ago, there's some stuff in Phase 4 that are good stuff. But for me personally, things didn't go awry in terms of quality with the MCU until like sometime after, at least at the tail end of Phase 4, getting into Phase 5, where it's like I'm seeing like cracks in the armor personally. Other people saw it a little bit sooner. I was not as bothered by him as other people were. But I see where they were coming from though. And it's like, I'm not sure if it's just like you got like certain like Kathleen Kennedy and like certain Tumblr type of writers, or DEI hires, people behind the scenes that making all the wrong moves and putting not making the narrative the priority. They put in like a message to make that a priority. It was kind of jumbles everything else up, where it's like, you've seen Ant-Man 3. It was a shit show. I'm sorry. Even though I love, Paul Rudd and Jonathan Majors during their parts, but everything else was kind of like a slog. It's like, okay, this is like, and then God, Secret Invasion was the worst of worst, at least for me. That part, I was like, oh God, y'all got issues. What is going on back there? That kind of thing. It's like night and day between what we see from like Ant-Man 3 and Secret Invasion and what we have here in the first Guardians film. It is like night and day in terms of quality. And matter of fact, from what I've heard, at a certain point around phase four, maybe, uh, yeah, a lot of, at least you hear this from like definitely in like the Disney animated movie side of things. Like got rid of like a lot of older veteran, writing staff and put in some new people because the you know the new mandate of what they want to put out is kind of wild. Where like the older writers didn't want to be on board with that in terms of how they want to make certain characters do certain things, and it seems kind of wonky. And it's like, ugh, okay, it's like I can understand like what's going on. I mean, you can look this up, and like there's one woman, this black woman, is like went viral in a negative way when she's pointing out like what was going on behind the scenes. Like, it's like we're gonna throw everything like like gay this and gay that. Like we're gonna throw it all in there. Yeah, just gonna throw it in there. It's like for what reason? Just to do it. And it's like it's no narrative purpose behind it. That's what I'm saying. Like the writing staff has been uprooted, and you can just tell by what we're watching. And some people might disagree with me, but it's just like you gotta separate yourself and your feelings towards the MCU and Kevin Feige. And it's like just look at it from an objective standpoint. In terms of the writing staff, the casting agent, casting director, the director, and like certain actors and the performances. Can you honestly say there was no inkling of an agenda at play here that's been put on the forefront instead of the narrative being put on the forefront? That's what I was mentioning in my Lilo and Stitch movie review, how like Disney, how it was operating, where it's like the narrative just being with like these two sisters trying to stick together after losing their parents and try to keep them from being separated by those people that take children away if they the parents are not, or at least the guardians are not doing their job to be a fit parents kind of thing. It's like a narrative that everybody can understand, and the whole Hawaiian aspect is the background. It's not on the foreground, because if Lilo and Stitch was made today, the writers of today, the animators of today, a lot of them will be leaning super hard into making Nani a girl boss, and she could do no wrong, instead of just being like a normal average woman who's trying to make things work, but failing but trying. And you learn tangentially about the Hawaiian aspects with like Ohana and everything like that. That's how it's supposed to be. Made today, they'll lean too hard into a Hawaiian aspect and make it super hyper focused on that, where people who are not Hawaiian wouldn't be able to glom onto that in like a unique way, because it's like if I'm not Hawaiian, how can I really understand, kind of thing. And I feel left out. And nobody should feel left out when they're watching the film. We should all generally understand, and having like certain specific thing about the character be the backdrop. None of us are assassins, but when John Wick loses his dog, we all can understand that universally. It's not hyper focused only on people who only have dogs. That kind of thing. Let's put it out there. I just gotta express that. Anyway, so while they're in prison, the other prisoners are looking at Gamora as fresh meat, because like, hey, Ronan and Thanos have killed a lot of our families and people and stuff like that, so we're gonna take a piece out of your hide as recompense, kind of thing. And especially Drax the Destroyer, who Ronan killed his wife and child. And so Peter stops him from killing her and saying like, look, it's Ronan who you want. As long as you're near her, he will come for her. And so that way, once he does, you can go after him because he's responsible. So that's where like, Peter, Gamora, and Rocket plan a prison break. And so they managed to escape and take the orb to Gamora's contact, because she was planning on betraying Ronan and Thanos altogether, because realizing, uh, what they can do with this supposed power is like, not something that she's, uh, particularly doesn't really care for them having it. So they take it to Collector, who explains what it is, which is an Infinity Stone, a part of six, each with a unique power set. And you get the first, showing of the Celestial that we see a little bit of in Thor Ragnarok, and a little bit more in the Eternals films, which I kind of like. The Eternals, it's not great, but it's not horrible as most other people will say it is. But not say I don't understand their feelings, but there's moments out of it that still gave me some enjoyment out of it, even though they did, people behind the scenes did a piss poor job of connecting the threads. Of, like, there's a giant celestial barely poking out, like a big giant celestial staff, so barely poking out of the Atlantic Ocean or something. I don't know what part of the ocean it is, and they barely address it, which is kind of like a big deal that should be brought up every once in a while in other films. Like, they only seen it in a little newspaper clipping in the She-Hulk show. It's kind of just tossed in there, where you blink and you miss it, and it's like, that's not enough. It's like a big deal. It's not something you should just gloss over. And that's where people point out one of the problems with MCU. There's no through line. They're just throwing stuff at the wall and hoping it stick, kind of thing, for the most part. And that's a big issue. Anyway, so one of the Collector's slaves takes it. She gets a vibrator because she tries to hopefully kill the Collector, because, like, she refused to be a slave there. But Drax, in the meantime, because he got drunk, and he lets out a signal to Ronan to get him to, because they went to nowhere. It was where the Collector is, and get Ronan to come in and bait him to come here so he can fight him one-on-one, which is stupid because he brings his fleet, and it causes big uproar where now, Gamora and Peter is trying to, like, okay, we cannot have Ronan or anybody getting this stone, because they will destroy the galaxy. So they take Nebula and Ronan's forces on this little chase sequence to keep them away from the stone. But Gamora shoots. They're in space, and Gamora shoots the ship or pod that Gamora is in. She's drifting in space. Rocket points out to Quill, like, her biology will let her survive a little longer, but she will die. But Peter, because he, sparked a connection with Gamora, this little, inkling of a love, connection. He goes out into space with his little, visor to help him breathe, but he takes it off to put it on her, but not before he lets out a signal to Yondu, who's showing up to pick him up at that exact spot. So he barters with Yondu in order to stop Ronan from using that, because Ronan's going to take that power stone. He puts it in his Warhammer, and he's going to first, because he's not with the whole treaty his people did with the Nova Corps, because he's like old school zealot kind of thing. So he kind of, like, made a splinter group of Kree. So Nebula decides, like, oh, I'm going to work with him, because she doesn't even like Thanos because of how he tortured her and turned her like basically almost like a cyborg. And she feels like, oh, he probably has the power to finally kill this dude. But then he goes to Xandar and to hopefully destroy it. Now, I want to make a point. I understand people have been making comments about Ronan, how he's such like a bland character, and I get it. But in recent years, with certain villains and certain properties of the MCU, not all, but there's been a few that's been a whole lot blander than even he. There's still some bit of stuff with him. We don't get much, but it's just like, man, you didn't think, uh, you think after, especially after Killmonger, you think like, oh, the MCU can write great villains. Uh, but no, they kind of dropped the ball after a certain point. Probably halfway through Phase 4, to be honest. Uh, in terms of some, making some really compelling villains. Uh, there's some moments here and there in Phase 5, but it's just like, wow. It's like, looking back, Ronan wasn't all too bad, honestly. Anyway, so the Guardians team up with the Ravagers in order to get the stone from Ronan. They got to keep him off from landing, from setting foot on the planet, so they can avoid him from him using the stone to just wipe out the planet, or at least the people on the planet. So they try to make sure that he stays on that ship. So eventually they team up with Peter sent out word to the Nova Corps. It was like a funny message. He sends to John C. Reilly. It's like, I may be a criminal, but I'm not a dick, at least. So they send like a lot of the Corps members, and it's kind of wild to me because when I hear about the Nova Corps, I think of like two people because like they never brought up about the Nova helmet, where it gives these kind of like power. Because in the comics, the Nova Corps has these helmets that give them kind of like their powers, where they kind of like these energy-based powers, almost like the Green Lantern Corps in a way. But instead of making constructs, they got like these kind of like these power field. But there's one particular helmet that's like the Nova Prime helmet or something like that, where it's like, like give them, like cosmic awareness or cosmic knowledge or something like that to the wielder. And Richard Rider in the comics is like the biggest one. It's kind of like the Hal Jordan, while his son, who probably is like the main one in the comics right now, is the Nova of the Earth, who's kind of like the Kyle Rayner of the MCU, where he's the young guy who doesn't know how to utilize the power as much as his father did, but he's still very exceptional at it. You don't get that in the MCU as of yet. They still haven't. You see the helmets as part of their suits, but none of them have that kind of power that we expect from in the comics with the Nova Corps members. Anyway, he still didn't introduce Richard Rider nor his son in the MCU as of yet, which is kind of wild to me after you establish the Nova Corps. But hell, they took an extra long time before they eventually utilized Adam Warlock, even though they introduced him in the second Guardians film. But after so many years, until finally in Guardians 3, they finally utilized him. But he's so powerful, he could have been very useful during the battle in Endgame. Just saying. It's kind of wild to me. I'm still bothered by that. Anyway, because in the comics, Adam Warlock is the wielder of the Soul Stone. They could have utilized that very effectively, but they did not. Anyway, so most of the Nova Corps members are getting annihilated by, Ronan's forces. But eventually, Peter, Rocket, Gamora, and Drax, and Groot end up in Ronan's ship, where they stop Nebula, but she runs away eventually to show up again in Guardians 2. But then they finally, take the fight to Ronan, but the ship is getting heavily damaged, so it's about to careen into into the ground of Xandar, and Groot sacrifices himself, does the "We Are Groot" thing, and covers the group in these very thick branches that cushion their fall because they don't have there's no escape pods. They already been used or whatever. So they make it out, and Groot is now just one little twig that's eventually gonna come back as baby Groot, then like adult sized Groot again eventually. Uh, so now Peter distracts Ronan with a little dance off thing while giving Drax and Rocket the time they need to use a device to destroy Ronan's hammer, releasing the stone, and Peter grabs it. But because his, genetic makeup being half, I forgot his father. His father's name Ego, but he's like a not celestial, but something old and ancient. I forgot the exact title of it. We'll get to that when I do the review next week. But since he's part of an ancient being, it allows him to hold on to it a little longer than average to keep him from destroying himself. But the other Guardians member hold hands, do a Care Bear stare with the Power Stone, and use it to destroy Ronan for good. But then Yondu shows up saying like, I need that orb, boy. And so, Peter does a bait and switch. But he delivers the real stone to Nova Prime to lock it up. And their criminal records are expunged. The Milano, Peter's ship is fixed up. And they go off on their little merry adventure. And and so far that is the end of the Guardian story. And matter of fact, I need to bring up about the mom situation. When Gamora was reaching out to Peter to hold on to the hold hands situation, Peter finally, because he could not hold on to his mom's hand to get the kind of closure thing, because he revered his mom, looked at her as like a hero, and to see her in that state as a kid, it was too much for him. But now it's like okay, like I gotta accept my mom's death and hold out, reach out to her. Like I got a moment, kind of like a psychosomatic thing. Finally, holding out my hand to her, what I should have done years ago. And he finally got that closure, and he finally was willing to open up that present she gave him years ago, and it's her own little mixtape with her own favorite songs, which he plays, as rings out at the end of the film. So, yeah, not much of a mother story, but it got a mother aesthetic to it, where it's like closure and a son losing a mom and coming to grips with that finally. But anyway, that ends Mother's Day month, or movie review month. So next week I'll start my Father's Day movie review month with Guardians of the Galaxy 2 and so on. But thank you all for joining in. I will see you guys tomorrow as I get back to playing some more Multiverses and playing more Jason Voorhees, because he's so good at, I want to play more of that. But I'll see you guys later. Take care. Have a great night. Peace.